The stranger in the rain was heavy that night, falling in thick sheets that turned the ground into mud. Daniel walked slowly through the strange forest, his clothes soaked, his boots heavy with water. He had been lost for 2 days after. A storm pushed him far off his path. Every sound in the forest felt different here, softer but also sharper at the same time. Leaves glistened with drops that glowed faintly, as if the plants were alive with their own light. The air smelled sweet, almost like fruit, but mixed with something he could not name. He paused to catch his breath under a giant tree. That was when he noticed tiny movements in the bushes. At first he thought they were animals, but then he saw small shapes. They were not animals, and they were not human. They were tiny people, no taller than his knee. With thin glowing lines running across their skin, their large eyes reflected the light like silver pools. They stared at him without moving. Hiding behind roots and rocks, Daniel raised his hand slowly, showing he had no weapon. "I won't hurt you," he whispered. But they didn't answer. Instead, they vanished into the shadows, only for new eyes to appear in another direction. It was as if the whole forest was watching him. He felt uneasy. But he also felt he had stepped into something ancient and secret. The rain poured harder. Daniel decided to move forward, hoping to find shelter. As he walked, the ground changed from soft soil to patches of blackened earth. The smell of smoke reached him. He came upon broken wooden structures, burned as if by fire. Small woven mats and clay pots lay scattered in the mud. The place looked like a tiny village, but something terrible had happened here. A faint sound broke the silence. He turned and saw a tiny figure struggling in the mud. It was a child. No, bigger than a cat. She looked weak and terrified before Daniel could reach her. The air filled with a deep growl. From the trees, a dark shadow leaped out. It was a beast, twice the size of a wolf, with claws like knives and eyes burning red. The little alien child froze, unable to move. The beast's jaws opened wide as it lunged forward. Daniel didn't think, he just ran. He grabbed a thick branch from the ground and stepped in front of the child. The beast crashed into him, knocking him back. Pain shot through his arm as the branch splintered under the force. The child squealed and hid behind him. The beast circled them, its claws sinking into the wet ground. Rain dripped from its fur, steam rising from its breath. Daniel's heart pounded, but he tightened his grip on the broken branch. He waited for it to jump again. When it did, he swung hard, hitting it across the face. It roared, snapping its teeth inches from his neck. Daniel shoved it back with all his strength, his boots slipping in the mud. The fight was messy. The beast slashed his arm, tearing through his sleeve. Blood mixed with rain as Daniel gritted his teeth. He stabbed the sharp end of the branch into its shoulder. The beast howled and staggered back. It looked at him with rage, but also hesitation. Finally, it turned and vanished into the shadows of the trees. Daniel fell to one knee, breathing hard. The child stepped out from behind him, her glowing eyes wide. More tiny figures appeared from the darkness. Surrounding him, they spoke in a language he didn't understand, soft, quick words like music. One of them, older and with silver lines on his face, stepped forward. "You? Save us." "You friend?" the elder said in broken human speech. Daniel blinked in surprise, too tired to speak. The elder touched Daniel's wounded arm. The glowing lines on his skin seemed to brighten. Warmth spread through Daniel's body. Dulling the pain, the tiny people moved closer, some reaching out to touch his hands. They didn't seem afraid anymore. The elder gestured for him to follow. Daniel hesitated, but then he saw more eyes in the forest, watching silently. They were not the beast's eyes. These were smaller, curious. It felt like the whole hidden world was opening its doors to him. They led him away from the ruined village. The ground sloped down. And soon they reached an opening in the earth. Inside was a tunnel lit by glowing crystals. The air was warm and dry, a welcome change from the cold rain. Daniel followed them deeper, feeling their eyes on him. He didn't know where they were taking him, but something told him his life was about to change forever. The tunnel opened into a large underground chamber. The walls shimmered with soft blue light from the crystals buried in the rock. Tiny houses made of clay and woven leaves were built into the walls, connected by rope bridges no bigger than Daniel's arm. The air was warm. Carrying the scent of flowers and herbs, dozens of the tiny aliens gathered, whispering to one another. While looking at the human who had just fought for them, Daniel stood there, dripping wet, blood still seeping from the scratch on his arm. The elder, the one with silver lines across his skin, pointed to a flat stone at the center of the room. "Sit," he said in his broken voice. Daniel sat, and a group of the smallest villagers came forward, carrying bowls of thick green liquid. They dipped their hands in and gently rubbed the mixture into his wounds. It was warm and smelled sharp, like crushed mint, almost immediately. The burning pain in his arm began to fade. "You saved, child," the elder said slowly. "Dark Claw will not stop. It will come again." Daniel frowned. "Dark Claw." The elder nodded, showing his own arm where 3 deep scars ran from wrist to shoulder. "Big beast. Hunts us many moons. Takes food. Takes our people," he explained. Daniel's jaw tightened. He had fought one before, but if more were coming. This village was in serious danger. A soft sound made him turn. The little girl he had saved was standing there, half hiding behind another villager. Her glowing eyes were fixed on him. Daniel smiled weakly, raising a hand in greeting. She didn't smile back, but she took a step closer, as if testing whether he was safe. The elder interrupted. "You rest? But tonight, you fight." Daniel's brows rose. "Tonight." The elder's silver-lined face grew serious. "They come after rain. Smell is strong. They hunt." It took Daniel a moment to understand they meant the Dark Claws would attack again within hours. He looked around at the tiny villagers. They were brave, but their weapons were nothing but thin spears and small slings. Against claws and teeth, they didn't stand a chance. Daniel knew he couldn't just walk away not after what he had seen. He rose to his feet, wincing as his muscles ached. "Show me where they come from," he said firmly. The elder's eyes widened slightly, but then he nodded. They led him back out into the rain. This time, several of the tiny warriors followed, carrying baskets of stones for their slings. The path wound through tall grass that came up to Daniel's chest. They stopped near a wide patch of muddy ground. "This," the elder said, pointing, "is where they hunt." Daniel examined the area. He saw deep claw marks in the mud, fresh and sharp. A half-eaten carcass of some forest animal lay nearby. Bones snapped clean. It was clear the beasts were strong enough to crush bone like it was nothing. Daniel looked at the mud, and an idea formed. He began gathering fallen branches, long vines, and flat stones. The villagers watched as he worked quickly. Tying vines to branches to create a crude spear, he dug shallow holes and placed sharpened sticks upright inside. Covering them with leaves and mud, the tiny aliens joined in, following his movements, setting traps in a circle around the clearing. By the time the sun began to fade, the ground was ready. Night fell quickly in the valley. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the air was thick and heavy. Daniel crouched near the largest trap. Gripping his vine-wrapped spear, the villagers hid in the grass, their glowing eyes barely visible. The forest was silent, too silent. Then it began. A low growl rolled through the darkness. Shapes moved between the trees, red eyes flashing in the faint light. One beast stepped out, then another, and another. There were 5 this time. Their black fur slick with rain. Claws glinting, they spread out, circling the clearing. their noses twitching as they caught the scent of the villagers. One beast lunged first, its weight sinking straight into a trap. It screamed as sharpened sticks pierced its leg. Daniel charged, driving his spear into its side. The beast thrashed, snapping the spear in half, but it was already badly wounded. Two more beasts came at him from the left. Daniel grabbed a stone from the ground and hurled it. Striking one in the eye, the tiny warriors released a rain of slang. Stones hitting the other in the face and chest, the clearing erupted into chaos. Daniel fought like a man possessed, dodging claws and teeth, using broken branches as weapons. One beast leaped onto him, knocking him to the ground. Its hot breath filled his face, and he smelled blood on its fangs before it could bite. A dozen tiny aliens swarmed it, stabbing with their small spears. The beast roared, tossing them off, but Daniel used the moment to roll free and drive a jagged branch into its throat. The remaining two beasts saw their leader fall and began to back away. Daniel roared at them, blood and mud dripping from his face. They growled once more, then turned and vanished into the shadows. The forest grew quiet again, broken only by the sound of rain hitting the leaves. Daniel stood there, chest heaving. The elder approached slowly, his glowing lines bright with pride. "You fight like mountain," the elder said. The villagers surrounded Daniel, some touching his arm, others bowing their heads. The little girl he had saved walked up to him. She held out a tiny glowing flower, placing it in his hand without a word. Daniel didn't know what it meant yet, but somehow it felt important. Somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning. The underground village was quieter now. The battle had ended. The bodies of the Dark Claws had been dragged away, and the air was thick with the scent of smoke from burning their remains. Daniel sat on a low stone bench while tiny healers wrapped his cuts in strips of soft woven plant fiber. Every movement of the villagers was careful, almost ceremonial, as if each act held meaning. The elder stood nearby, his silver-lined skin glowing faintly in the crystal light. "You strong," he said slowly, "but fight is not end." Dark Claw not only danger. Daniel looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" The elder's gaze grew distant. "This valley, not safe for long. There are others." He didn't explain more, but Daniel could feel the weight behind his words. The little girl from before appeared again. She had the glowing flower she had given him earlier, now tied to a thin string and worn around her neck. She stood beside the elder, but kept her eyes fixed on Daniel. The elder placed a hand on her small shoulder. "This is Lyra," he said. Daniel smiled and nodded. "Hello, Lyra." She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened around the flower. After the healing, the elder motioned for Daniel to follow. They walked through narrow tunnels, the walls shimmering with green and gold crystals. The air was warmer here, and the faint sound of water echoed ahead. The tunnel opened into a vast cavern, unlike anything Daniel had seen. In the center was a pool of glowing blue water, perfectly still. Around it were carving strange symbols and tiny statues that looked older than the village itself. The elder's voice lowered. "This is Heart of Valley." Daniel knelt beside the pool, feeling a faint warmth radiating from it. "What is it?" I asked. "Life water," the elder replied. "It feeds forest, feeds us. Without it, valley die." Daniel dipped his fingers into the water. It was warmer than it looked, smooth like silk. The elder's eyes darkened. "Many have tried to take it. Humans, beasts, others. This is why we hide." Daniel felt a knot form in his stomach. He understood now the Dark Claws weren't just hunting the villagers for food. They were being drawn to the power of this place. If outsiders discovered it, the tiny aliens wouldn't survive. "You protect village," the elder said. "Now you protect this." Daniel didn't answer immediately, but he knew he couldn't turn away as they left the cavern. Daniel noticed Lyra walking behind them. She moved silently, her small bare feet making no sound on the stone. When they reached the main hall of the village, she finally spoke, her voice soft and careful. "You will stay?" she asked. Daniel turned to look at her. Her eyes were wide, glowing faintly in the crystal light. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I'll help as long as I can." She seemed to think about this, then nodded once before slipping away into the crowd. The villagers had begun a quiet celebration. They lit small crystal lamps, their glow filling the chamber with warm light. A few played tiny stringed instruments that produced soft, echoing notes. Children danced in circles, their glowing lines tracing patterns in the air. For a moment, Daniel forgot the danger outside. It felt peaceful, safe even, but the peace didn't last. A group of scouts rushed into the hall, speaking quickly in their own language. The elder's expression hardened. He turned to Daniel. "Tracks. More dark claw." Too many this time. Daniel stood, his hand tightening around the makeshift spear one of the villagers had given him. "How many?" The elder hesitated, then said, "More than we can fight." They gathered in a small council chamber. Daniel leaned over a rough map drawn into the dirt floor, showing the valley's paths and the village's hidden entrances if they come. "Here," Daniel said, pointing to the main tunnel. "They'll break through before we can stop them." The elder nodded grimly. Daniel thought for a moment, then traced a longer path through the forest. "We could draw them away, trap them." Here instead, the elder looked at him carefully. "Dangerous. You may not come back." Daniel smiled faintly. "I didn't come here to play it safe." Lyra appeared again, standing in the doorway. Her voice was small but steady. "If you go, I go." The elder shook his head sharply. "No. You. Stay." But Daniel saw something in her eyes, determination. The same kind he had seen during the fight. "Maybe she can help," he said quietly. "She knows the forest better than I do." The elder looked between them for a long moment, then gave a slow, reluctant nod. That night, Daniel stood at the edge of the forest with Lyra at his side. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still wet. The scent of fresh earth heavy in the air. The moonlight barely reached through the thick canopy. Daniel could feel the tension in the air. Something was coming. He looked down at Lyra, who held a small bough made of bone and vine. "You sure you're ready for this?" he asked. She looked up at him and said, "I was born ready." Daniel smiled. Gripping his spear, somehow, he believed her. Ahead, in the distance, the faint sound of claws scraping against stone reached their ears. The hunt was about to begin. Again, but this time, they weren't going to wait for the enemy to come to them. The forest was still, too still. Daniel could hear only the slow beat of his own heart and the faint rustle of leaves. Beside him, Lyra moved without sound, her glowing lines faint under the shadow of the trees. They had left the safety of the underground village hours ago, following the trail of deep claw marks and broken branches. The night air was damp, and the smell of wet soil mixed with something sharp and metallic, the smell of blood. Daniel paused. Crouching low, ahead, the path opened into a clearing. Its center covered in churned mud and trampled plants. This was the hunting ground, and it was fresh. He could see paw prints, the size of plates pressed deep into the earth. Lyra knelt beside one and touched the edge with her small hand. Her voice was a whisper. "They are close. Maybe watching us now." Daniel scanned the trees, his grip tightening on his spear. Every shadow seemed to move. Every gust of wind carried a whisper of danger. He had fought these beasts before, but now there would be many. His traps and strength would be tested like never before. They worked quickly, setting traps in silence. Daniel dug shallow pits and lined them with sharpened stakes, covering them with thin mats of leaves. Lyra moved swiftly, tying vine snares between trees and hanging stones overhead that would drop when a line was pulled, when the traps were ready. They retreated to a high ridge overlooking the clearing. From there, they could see without being seen the first sign of the enemy came as a faint vibration in the ground. Daniel felt it through his boots, steady thump, thump. Then, glowing red eyes appeared one by one in the dark. They came out slowly at first, huge black shapes melting from the shadows. The moonlight caught their wet fur, their muscles shifting under the skin, claws sinking deep into the mud. Daniel counted them 6. Number 7. The largest was in front, a scar running down its muzzle. Its breath steamed in the cool night air, and its growl rumbled like distant thunder. Lyra's eyes narrowed. "The Alpha," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Take him down. The rest might run." The Alpha stepped forward, sniffing the air. It froze, its head turning sharply toward the ridge. Daniel knew it had caught their scent. The beast roared, and the others answered, the sound echoing through the forest. Then they charged, mud flying under their paws. The first one hit a pit trap, screaming as the sharpened stakes tore into its leg. Another was yanked sideways when a vine snare caught its neck, slamming it into a tree. But the others kept coming. Faster, angrier, Daniel and Lyra sprang into action. He hurled his spear, hitting one in the shoulder, sending it tumbling. Lyra pulled a vine, releasing a cluster of heavy stones that crashed. Onto another's back, the beast rolled over with a howl, its legs kicking wildly. The Alpha leaped over the traps, heading straight for Daniel. Its shadow fell over him as it landed, claws striking sparks against the rocks. Daniel grabbed a thick branch and swung, the impact jolting his arms. The beast barely flinched, swiping at him with enough force to knock him sideways. Pain shot through his ribs, but he forced himself up, dodging another strike. Lyra shouted from behind, "Daniel, move." He dropped to the ground just as she fired an arrow. It struck the Alpha in the eye, the beast roaring in rage. Blinded on one side, it thrashed. But Daniel used the moment to grab a jagged stone and slam it into the beast's jaw. The bone cracked, and the Alpha stumbled. Daniel drove his knee into its chest. Knocking it back toward the ridge, it slipped, falling into one of the hidden pits, impaling itself on the stakes. The other beasts saw their leader fall, and their growls turned to uncertain whines. Daniel roared at them, raising his arms wide. Lyra fired another arrow, striking one in the flank. The remaining beasts hesitated, then turned and melted back into the darkness, the forest swallowing them whole. The clearing fell silent except for the sound of Daniel's ragged breathing. He leaned against a tree, sweat and rain mixing on his skin. Lyra stepped beside him, her bow still in hand. Her glowing eyes met his, and for a moment they just stood there in the quiet. Finally, she said, "You fight like a mountain, but mountains fall if they stand alone." Daniel gave a small laugh. "Good thing I'm not alone then." They checked the traps, making sure no wounded beasts could return to attack later. The Alpha was still, its massive body a dark shadow in the pit. Daniel knew this victory would buy the village time, but he also knew the Elder was right. Dark claws were not the only danger in this valley. As they made their way back to the village, the rain began again. It pattered softly on the leaves, washing the blood from the ground. Daniel carried a sense of unease in his chest. This battle had been hard, but something told him the real fight was still to come. Beside him, Lyra walked quietly, but her head was high, her step steady. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The underground village was alive with sound. Drums made from hollow wood echoed softly, and the glowing crystals in the walls burned brighter than usual. Daniel had never seen the tiny people so full of energy. Children danced in small circles, their glowing lines painting shapes in the air. Warriors stood proudly near the entrance, their slings and spears resting at their sides. Everyone was celebrating. Daniel sat on a smooth stone bench. Feeling awkward, he was still sore from the fight with the dark claws, but it wasn't the pain that made him restless. It was the way the villagers kept glancing at him, whispering, bowing their heads. He didn't understand why he had helped them fight before, but this time felt different. The elder approached, silver-lined skin glowing in the firelight. "You do more than fight," he said slowly. "You save us. You save Valley." Daniel gave a small shrug. "I just did what I could." The elder shook his head. "No. You do what no one do before." He turned and clapped his hands twice. The sound sharp in the air. The crowd parted from the shadows. Lyra stepped forward. She was dressed differently. Now her usual simple leaf and fiber clothes were replaced by a gown made of glowing petals. The fabric shimmered with every movement, and her glowing lines were painted with silver patterns. In her hands, she carried a wreath made of crystal flowers, each one glowing faintly blue. Daniel blinked in confusion. "What's going on?" He whispered to one of the warriors beside him. The warrior only smiled and said, "Honor." Before stepping back, the elder stood tall, his voice echoing across the hall. "Our way is old," he said. "When one saves all, we give most precious gift, our daughter." He gestured toward Lyra. "She is daughter of this village. Now she is yours." Daniel froze. He looked at Lyra, who stood calmly, her eyes fixed on him. The meaning of the moment hit him like a wave. They weren't thanking him with food or shelter. They were offering him family, a bond for life. I can't," he said softly, shaking his head. "I'm human. I'm from another world." The elder stepped closer. "This not matter. Heart matters." Lyra stepped forward until she stood directly before him. Her voice was calm but carried a quiet strength. "You saved me. You saved all. I will walk with you." Daniel could see the faintest blush in the glow of her skin. Her hands trembled slightly as she held out the crystal wreath. The hall was silent. Dozens of eyes watched, waiting for his choice, Daniel's. Thoughts spun. He had never expected this. Before he came here, he had been a wanderer with no home, no one waiting for him. Now, these tiny people were asking him to stay forever. He looked into Lyra's eyes. There was no fear there, only trust. Slowly, he reached out and took the wreath from her hands. The crowd gasped, and a low cheer rippled through the hall. The elder smiled broadly. "Then it is done." Lyra placed her small hand in his. Her skin was warm, her glowing lines pulsing faintly. Under his touch, the drums grew louder, and the villagers began to sing in their strange musical language. Some scattered glowing petals around them, which drifted slowly to the ground like snow. Daniel felt a strange warmth spread through him, not just from her touch, but from the way the entire village seemed to welcome him at once. It wasn't the kind of celebration he knew from human cities. There were no loud toasts or endless feasts. This was quieter, deeper, like a promise made by the earth itself. That night, the celebration lasted long after the crystal lights dimmed. Daniel sat with Lyra, near a small fire. She told him stories of the valley, the old battles, the hidden places in the forest, the secret paths only her people knew. He told her about the stars, about the worlds beyond the sky. She listened as if each word was treasure, her eyes never leaving his face before they parted for the night. She said something that stayed in his mind. "Now, your home is here, but your heart will tell you why." Daniel didn't fully understand what she meant, but as he lay in the small sleeping space they had given him, he felt something he hadn't felt in years: belonging. Far away in the forest, unseen by the celebrating villagers, glowing red eyes watched from the shadows. The dark claws were gone. But something else had come to the valley, something that did not care about crystal water or tradition. It only cared about conquest, and soon. act would test whether Daniel's new family could truly be kept safe. The morning came quietly. The underground village was still, its crystal lights dim after the long night of celebration. Daniel woke to the sound of soft footsteps outside his sleeping space. When he stepped out, he saw Lyra waiting, her hands folded in front of her. She smiled faintly. "The elder wants to speak with you." They walked together through the narrow tunnel, the walls glistening with drops of crystal water. Daniel felt the weight of the wreath still hanging in his sleeping space. It wasn't just a decoration, it was a promise. He had accepted it. And the whole village believed he had chosen to stay. The elder was standing near the main hall, speaking to a group of warriors. When he saw Daniel, he dismissed the others and turned to face him. "Danger comes again," the elder said. "Scouts see strangers in forest, not beasts." "Men?" Daniel's chest tightened. "Humans." The elder nodded slowly. "Not like you. They take, they burn, they sell." Daniel had met men like that before on other worlds. Smugglers, raiders, scavengers. They didn't care about life, only profit. If they found the valley's crystal water, they would destroy everything to get it. "How many?" Daniel asked. 10, maybe more." The elder said, "They have fire weapons." The elder's voice dropped lower. "You can go. Leave valley before they come. You are not bound to fight for us." Daniel's jaw clenched. "You're saying I should run?" The elder shook his head. "I say you must choose. Your life or our home." Daniel walked away to think. He found himself on one of the high ridges overlooking the forest. The air was cool, and sunlight filtered through the trees in golden beams. He remembered the night he stumbled into this valley, wet, tired, and lost. He remembered the small child he had saved, the fierce battle in the mud. The way the village had trusted him without fear. Lyra appeared behind him, quiet as always. "You are thinking of leaving," she said, not as a question, but as a truth. Daniel turned. "If I stay, I'll be putting you in more danger." Her glowing eyes softened. "We are already in danger. With you, we have a chance." Daniel studied her face. There was no fear there, only determination. "You don't understand," he said. "These men, they kill without mercy. They take what they want." Lyra stepped closer. "I understand. More than you think. I have seen villages burn." Her voice didn't shake, but her hands curled into small fists. "When I was small, my mother's sister's village was taken. No one came to help." She looked directly at him. "But you came for us." Daniel's throat tightened. In that moment, he knew his decision wasn't really about danger. It was about who he was. If he left now, he would go back to wandering, always moving, never belonging. If he stayed, he could lose his life, but he could also protect something worth fighting for. That night, the council gathered. The warriors spoke of hiding deeper underground, sealing the tunnels. Others wanted to send scouts to mislead the raiders. The elder listened, then looked at Daniel. "What say you?" Daniel stepped forward. "We don't hide. We don't run. We make them fear this valley before they even find it." The hall went silent. Lyra's eyes lit up, but some warriors looked uncertain. The elder tilted his head. "You have plan?" Daniel nodded. "We set traps in the forest. We use the land. You know every tree, every stream. They don't." He looked at the warriors. "We make them believe this place is cursed. They will leave." After the meeting, Daniel found Lyra sitting near the fire pit. She was sharpening her small bone-tipped arrows, the glow of the flames reflecting in her eyes. "You spoke like a leader," she said quietly. Daniel chuckled. "I'm not a leader," she shook her head. "You are? You just don't see it yet." They sat in silence for a while. Finally, Daniel said, "When this is over, if we win, I'll stay." Lyra's hands stilled, and for the first time, she smiled fully. It wasn't the quiet, polite smile she gave strangers. It was warm, real, and meant only for him. But far away in the dark, the raiders were already moving. They carried weapons that spat fire, their boots crushing the forest floor. They didn't know the valley yet, but they would soon learn that the human who lived there was not a man to be underestimated. The morning sky was gray, heavy with clouds. Mist clung to the forest floor. Curling around the roots of ancient trees, Daniel stood at the ridge with Lyra beside him. Below them, the valley stretched wide and green, its beauty hiding the danger. Waiting inside, they both knew this was the day the raiders would come. Daniel's traps were ready. Hidden pits lined with sharpened stakes, vines stretched between trees to trip running men. Logs balanced high, waiting to crash down with crushing force. Every snare, every ambush point had been set in silence through the night. The tiny warriors were in position, their glowing eyes dimmed with ash to hide them in the shadows. The elder approached, leaning on his carved staff. "You have given us hope," he said. "Now we see if hope is enough." Daniel gave a short nod. "We make it enough." Lyra glanced at him, her small bow already strung. "We will," she added firmly. It began with a distant crack of branches. Figures emerged from the mist, tall men in heavy boots, weapons strapped across their backs. Their clothes were patched with bits of armor. Their eyes cold, they moved like predators, scanning the trees. One at the front raised his hand, signaling the others to spread out. Daniel stayed hidden in the undergrowth, watching. He waited until the first raider stepped directly into a vine snare. The man was yanked off his feet and slammed against a tree. His weapon clattering to the ground, shouts erupted. The raider spinning to see what had happened. That was the signal. A rain of sling stones fell from above. Tiny warriors moved between branches, their shots fast and precise. 2 raiders staggered back, clutching their heads. Another fell into a pit with a sharp cry. The forest seemed alive, every shadow hiding danger. One man spotted Daniel and raised his fire weapon. Daniel rolled to the side, the blast scorching the tree trunk where he had been. He came up swinging a heavy branch, striking the man across the jaw. The raider fell, his weapon tumbling away. Daniel grabbed it, tossing it into the nearest pit before another could pick it up. A raider lunged at Lyra, but she was quicker. She ducked under his reach and fired an arrow point blank into his leg. The man roared, stumbling back into a tangle of vines where 2 tiny warriors leaped onto him. Stabbing with bone-tipped spears, Lyra moved on, her glowing lines flashing as she disappeared into the mist again. The leader of the raiders shouted orders. He had seen enough of the traps and wanted to push straight through to the village. But Daniel stepped into his path. "You want this valley?" Daniel said, his voice cold. "You go through me," the leader sneered, raising his weapon. But Daniel charged before he could fire. They crashed together, rolling in the mud. The leader was strong, but Daniel fought with the fury of a man. Protecting his home, they grappled, trading blows. The leader drew a knife and slashed. Grazing Daniel's side, pain flared, but Daniel caught the man's wrist and twisted hard. Forcing the knife into the mud, with a surge of strength, Daniel drove his shoulder into the man's chest, sending him sprawling backward. A hidden snare snapped around the leader's legs, yanking him upside down. He dangled there, cursing. As tiny warriors swarmed to take his weapons, the remaining raiders hesitated. They had lost their leader, half their number were down, and the forest was still full of unseen enemies. Daniel stepped forward, his voice echoing, "Leave now, and you live. Stay, and you don't walk out." The men looked at each other, then turned and fled into the mist, their boots pounding the wet earth. The sound faded until the forest was quiet again. The warriors cheered, their voices high and bright. Lyra ran to Daniel, her small hands gripping his arm. "You did it," she said, her smile glowing even brighter than her skin. Daniel shook his head. "We did it." The elder joined them, placing a hand over his heart. "You are one of us now." No doubt, no question, in the days that followed, life in the valley returned to its rhythm. Daniel built stronger defenses along the ridges, taught the warriors new ways to fight. Lyra often walked with him through the forest, pointing out paths and plans he hadn't noticed before. At night, they would sit by the glowing pool in the heart of the valley. Daniel sometimes thought about the worlds beyond the forest. But every time he looked at Lyra, every time he heard the laughter of the tiny villagers, he knew he had found his place. Whispers spread beyond the valley. Stories of a giant human who had taken the elder's daughter as his bride. A man who had stood against beasts and men alike. To the outside world, he was a mystery. But to the tiny glowing people of the valley, he was simply their protector, their guardian, forever.